Okay. I'll close this. Okay, so, all right. We have about 58 people on board, and I think we'll start. Hello, everyone. I'm very pleased that you are here and that you've joined us on such a scorchingly hot day in Northern California and Pacifica. It's better to be indoors probably than it is outdoors. And if I can well, actually, my cat's actually up and about on all fours, which is unbelievable because she's usually asleep. The friends are thrilled that you're with us, and we have, in reality, a full roster of people who have signed up for our Zoom webinar this time around. So that's 100 participants. We hope to see you all joining, even if it's a bit late. I hope everyone does sign up. We've had to turn people away because we did get the maximum number, and we can't handle more than 100. So first off, I'd like to say that we do have a program, a webinar coming up in September, on September the 12th at 4. And that's our rescheduled Dr. Louise Rocha's program, who's chair of ichthyology at Cal Academy, saving the coral reefs. Because of a family emergency, he wasn't able to do July, and he will be doing it in September on the 12th. You will receive notification as usual by email and through our newsletter. And on October the 17th at 4, we have Quirk and her bats. And that's a very popular yearly program that we have for both adults and children. And so please sign up. I know everyone has their favorite subjects and not necessarily wants to sign up for every lecture that we provide, but I do hope you will be interested in the upcoming ones. I have the distinct honor and pleasure of welcoming Zara McDonald today. She's the biologist and entrepreneur of Felidae and the Bay Area Puma Project research programs. And she will talk to us about mountain lions in the Bay Area, their biology, the recent changes their studies have uncovered, and all about these shy and elusive animals living at the urban edge and even in the urban areas. And I will pass this on to Zara. We are recording this, so at a later date, this will be available through our website. So please be aware of that. And Zara, take it away.
Thank you. Is Mila or Mila? I meant to ask you. So I'm probably going to shut my video off so that it's not distracting for everybody, but thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be talking with you today. And let's proceed. If I can. So the topics today are listed here, and I'm going to give you a brief introduction to Felidae and what we do. I'm going to talk about nature and people colliding, part of which those of you that live in the Pacifica, Daly City, on the peninsula area are experiencing right now. I'm going to have just a brief history of the history of California mountain lions. I know you recently had Tiffany Yet from Center for Biological Diversity, but I'll talk a little bit about that. Then I'm going to talk about the mountain lion, its biology, ecology, just so you can understand a little bit more about what's going on with this species of concern for us. And some urban edge issues, a little about our Bay Area research highlights, and a little bit about technologies we're working on, and then living in mountain lion habitat. And we'll talk about risks, and then Q&A. So who are we? We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization conducting research and conservation programs, and we were formed in 2006. We're based in Marin County. We work throughout the Bay Area, actually throughout California, and we work internationally. So we have local and global programs. Our mission is to strengthen the conservancy of native felid populations within local and global ecosystems. And we want to do that using innovative approaches to research, education, and community stewardship. So our dedicated team consists of 2 PhD scientists, 2 biologists, a biologist technician, so a pretty small team, 2 MBA, Biz Dev, and community engagement. And we host and train a number of international interns every year. We currently have one on board with us and another joining in the fall. And then we have a great, an awesome group of volunteers, more than 100 volunteers performing a number of skilled tasks for us listed there. So we've seen a gradual increase in sightings with the advent of camera technology. And a lot of the questions I get are, what's going on? Is it real, or is it perceived that there are more lions or more sightings, or what's actually going on? Well, a couple of things. As lions have had to adapt to fragmented habitats, pumas are opportunists. So they're going to take advantage of subsidies that exist at the urban edge. And so they simply cannot tell the difference between pets and wild prey, which is really why we who live at the urban edge need to start taking responsibility for preventing those encounters and protecting our animals. And so they are still avoidant and quite fearful of humans. And I get that question frequently as well. The other reason we're seeing these sightings on these cameras is that we're just seeing what's been there all along. So there's a lot of puma presence that has been there that we just weren't catching, on these cameras because they didn't exist yet. So more human activity, and so we are bumping into pumas who are desperately trying to prevent encounters themselves, yet the continued fragmentation of habitat is making that much harder for them. Car strikes, of which there are over 100 a year in California that kill pumas. Those are also an issue, and in some areas they are a complete block of connectivity. Depredation permits, I won't go into them too much today, but depredation permits are state-sanctioned removal of lions, and that is the leading cause of legal death for lions in California currently, known death. Human fear and sharing misinformation is something that I like to talk a little bit about, just because some people are sharing misinformation on social media and next door about pumas. And for those of you who are here today, I would encourage you to collectively prevent that. It damages conservation efforts, our research, and as you will see here, when I go through some more of this talk, how important pumas are to healthy natural systems. Car strikes as well are one of the barriers to gene flow and diversity. And so this is something that can cause lots of issues. I think it's a darling issue for many people, which is sort of overpasses and underpasses. And we'll talk a little bit about that. The anthropause at the end, so the effects, basically we are in the 6th mass extinction. So the Anthropocene era, we have entered that, and the COVID shutdown provides a unique data set to compare. So we're looking at that as part of our current research as well. But I will repeat that pumas are well conditioned to avoid humans over hundreds of years, so they continue to avoid us. And this is just a nice, a really nice setup of an enclosure where you see the puma here working desperately to get to these chickens and tries a few times. And this is sort of a really great enclosure that I've shared this a few times. Once it was shared with me, and it's from your area, but I find it valuable as an educational tool for those who come and ask, how can I protect my chickens? Well, this is about as perfect as it gets. I mean, this puma doesn't score and ends up leaving. Home security cameras are increasingly valuable for those of us who like to work with data. So the advent of this technology is really a tremendous addition to researchers. And we can answer a lot of questions about what's going on at the urban edge by adding these data and our sightings map data, which I'll mention as well. I think that's in the chat. You can send images and video to info@BAP, but we also have a sightings map on our BAP.org site. You can share them there as well, depending on how sensitive they are. So why are we seeing pumas on our home cameras? Well, again, new technology shows us what was there. And deer are attracted, they're abundant and attracted to landscaped gardens. And so this is something that has become increasingly difficult to change because deer are eating things they never used to eat, and they are, thank God the pumas are keeping these numbers somewhat in check just from being on the landscape, but it's important to recognize that they do follow deer into these neighborhoods. The edge habitats often fall between quality puma habitat patches, and so neighborhoods happen to often be in that edge habitat, and we'll talk about what the edge habitat is as I go forward. But this video was captured at night, and this puma's just moving through the neighborhood pretty rapidly in a hurry to be on his way. And again, this is something, I have hundreds of these sent to me every month, and they are, you know, a really great data source for us. The cat of many names. This cat of many names is known as the mountain lion, but also as the cougar, puma, catamount, ghost cat, and many other names. It holds a Guinness World Record for having the most names of any species. 40 alone in English, and many more in Spanish and South American dialects. And a few of these here you probably recognize, and most of them probably make sense. Gato Mondes, cat of the mountain, and Cherokee Indians called them Klandagi, lord of the forest. The Chickasaws called them Coictu, cat of God. And Cusco, for those of you who have been to Peru, into this area, is laid out in the shape of a puma. So this animal has lots of folklore and stories, and it was very respected by some of the Native American tribes. So let's just look quickly at the history of California mountain lions. And pre-1900, they had a pretty nice range from the tip of the Yukon to the bottom tip of South America. And in 1684, I believe, Connecticut offered a bounty of 20 shillings apiece for the killing of catamounts. And that was the local name of the cougar in Connecticut. And in Massachusetts, they were paying bounties on cougars in 1742. So essentially, Native Americans offered this big cat, or this small big cat, respect. And the new European immigrants felt a lot of fear and loathing. And so as a result, this is basically its current range today. Legislatively, this cat was a bountied predator, as I said, and that's sort of a highlighted date in 1907. A bunch of activity up into 1990, where it was made a specially protected mammal through Prop 117. And we've had a few pieces of legislation since, SB 132, which actually was a really big and important legislation to mandate non-lethal action on pumas for public safety if they're not deemed a threat, because previously they would have just killed the animal. And then most recently, the temporary endangered species status in the Central Coast, which includes parts of the Bay Area and Southern California. So the specially protected mammals, an interesting descriptor because it's a little misleading, and the depredation permit that I mentioned is a permit that is issued if you lose a pet or livestock or property, and you report this to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, you can have a permit issued to remove the cat. And this is something that has been pretty controversial for some time. And it also is the leading cause of death for lions in California. It's around 130 to 140 per year are removed. And if you look at the San Mateo stats there, it has a potential in the county for about 10 to 12 mountain lions. And in 2018, I think this was when I took these numbers, there were 26 depredation permits issued, which is more than the population there. And 5 lions were legally taken. And I want to talk about some of the ramifications for these depredation permits if the lion is just annoying to somebody and not really a problem animal, or moving through a property and not sticking around. We can talk more about that as well. But over 300 mountain lions are killed annually in California as a result of human activity, and this is not sustainable. So this cat is close by to you guys in SAPUC, where we've been monitoring for a decade. And pumas feel relatively safe to move in that habitat, thank God. So mortalities of mountain lions in California, as I mentioned, depredation permits are at the top. And car strikes are a close second. Poaching, illegal killing, we know it's a pretty high number. It's probably double 50, but we'll put a conservative number in there. We often have communications about poachings and illegal killings, which is, the affectionate term is the 3 S's, which is shoot, shovel, and shut up. Disease risk is increasing there, and I'll talk more about disease affecting mountain lions on the rise at urban edge communities, specifically relating to pets and zoonotic diseases. Poisoning, anticoagulant rodenticides have been long time an issue for all levels of wildlife, and pumas are tertiary recipients of this. And they, most of the pumas that are tested today have anticoagulant rodenticide in their systems. During a necropsy, that is when they find out. And public safety is a really interesting number, because the number of pumas that are killed per year in California due to being a public safety threat is a very low number. It's, some years it's 0, and some years it's 2 or 3. And I like to highlight that simply because pumas have really become masters at avoiding humans, and they still are quite able to manage to do that in this very crowded landscape we live in here. So let's talk a little bit about lions, and I'm going to give you some highlights just basically on these critters. They're native to the Americas. They are classified as a small cat, but they, we'll talk about their size shortly, but they are not in the large cat family. So they're the largest of the small cats. They're adaptable to many different habitats. So they can live in prairies and forests and deserts and swamps and, you know, multiple different terrains, so very adaptable. They're solitary cats. They have the largest terrestrial geographical range of any animal with the exception of humans in the Western Hemisphere. So again, they range from the Yukon to the tip of Argentina. They are low density and wide ranging, and this is a really important thing to highlight today. I'll show you more about their range sizes and the spaces they need to survive and thrive, and males spend most of their lives just on the move. So we will get into that. They're crepuscular. They move they're most active from dusk to dawn. They move throughout the night, which is when they do primarily take down their prey. They're solitary and reclusive. And I will underscore that again. They are solitary and reclusive unless they are in a family group, they're mating. Those are really the only two. You know, they may share kills once in a while, but they are not moving in prides or groups. Pumas are very territorial. So they are especially males, and males will fight to the death over territory. And when I tell people about the sort of male competition for habitat, and then I start to explain what happens with the young pumas when they're trying to disperse, it makes a lot more sense when you think about the pumas that end up either in San Francisco or in town or communities, and they have to be moved back to habitat is usually a young dispersing male. And we'll talk more about that as well. Lifespan in the wild is 6 to 13 years. I think we're seeing a decrease in that in these environments as well. I think usually I haven't seen a cat live beyond 6, 7, or 8 years old in a decade. Physically, the mountain lions are slender and agile. They have these muscular necks and strong jaws, and those are really what they use to take down their prey. And I'll show you some visuals of that. Solid color, puma concolor, one color. Tawny gray or red tones, and in the Bay Area we have, throughout California, it's more of a tawny brown. Their length is 5 to 9 feet, so that includes this long, thick, cylindrical tail, which makes up about 40% of that length. And they use that tail for balance, balance and moving in difficult terrains, and it's a distinct feature on these cats. They have retractable claws, 5 retractable claws on the front paws, and one's a dew claw, just like your house cat. And those 4 paws are larger than the hind paws simply because they are an ambush predator. So they grab their prey with those 4 paws to take them down when they're ambushing and attacking. Again, they're territorial, and you know, I can show you some of the ways their habitats will overlap. And they have acute hearing, olfactory, and vision. And so because they have these excellent sensory perceptions, they detect and stalk their prey using these as ambush predators. So so they sort of scan the landscape with their eyes, and they listen carefully. And you know, and you'll see videos where lions won't move for considerable amounts of time, and you think there's no video actually happening, but in fact, they are very still and very quiet, which is how they are able to take down their prey and surprise them. Vertically and horizontally, they're amazing jumpers. They can jump to 22 feet. I think that was the highest I've seen up in Sacramento, that a cat jumped over a 22-foot high fence to get into an equipment yard. And so horizontally, they will also have this amazing jump I can show you here, but 20 to 30 feet, speed bursts up to 50 miles an hour for very short periods of time. So they can't sustain it for very long, but they use that to attack the prey. And you can see those limbs and the long hind limbs that have evolved to leaping onto the back of their prey. Mountain lions have padded paws. There's a nice image here of a padded paw. They have 3 distinct lobes on the bottom. So if you think you are seeing mountain lion tracks, I would recommend looking for those 3 lobes, as well as looking for no claws. So if you see claws, it's usually going to be a dog or a coyote. And puma tracks are pretty distinct. They're not symmetrical. And the second digit is the longest, and if you look at that padded paw, the second from the left is the longest digit. This is the right front paw. And so they have sheathed claws. They're retractable. They are only going to show up in certain terrains, snow and possibly in some mud, but usually not. There's a mountain lion up in the trees here, and I'm just going to show you sort of the typical stalk, sprint, ambush, and a bite to the back of the neck of this bighorn, and takes it down. And this is a situation that, or an effort that can completely wear out the puma over a 20-minute period, just trying to wrestle a prey item to the ground. They're capable of taking down 2 to 3 times their weight. So very powerful. This is a puma taking down a deer on our cameras, so we kind of spliced this together. But it's a wrestle, and by the time they actually take the prey down, they're pretty exhausted, and they don't always feed right away, which is one of the reasons why I recommend, if you come across a deer kill, to try to avoid it or leave it alone, because the puma may be resting close by and you may chase it off. Mountain lions are obligate carnivores. So they must eat meat to survive. This cat is caching a prey here, a prey item. It's a large buck. And this cat has young, and she's gonna bring her young back to feed later. But what she does is cover that prey, cover the kill so that she can come back and protect it from other species and keep it fresh and revisit it. And they'll revisit it over a period of 2 to 3, sometimes 4 days. And if a human walks by, sometimes that will cause the animal to leave the area and not return. Generalist predators, so mouse to moose and everything in between, is what they'll eat, but deer make up 3/4 of that diet. And so they'll also eat the occasional greenery. And yes, they will eat bobcats and coyotes. It's not common, but they will. And the rabbits, raccoons, porcupines, foxes, birds, rodents, bats, and frogs. And 6,000 calories a day is about the typical amount for a male mountain lion of 3 to 4 years. 3 to 4 years in 1 week. So that's a kill a week for a male mountain lion. So this cat is making a territorial marking, and what he's doing is leaving his scent, and he's smelling a previous scent he left. So it's a male sort of moving through his territory, and he's signaling to other cats and other species that this is my spot, this is my territory, and I'm here. And so he moves through that territory and will communicate with females that way and females will send a pretty strong message when they're in heat to that male. I may have a sound here, but I'm not sure if you guys can hear my computer sound, unfortunately. So this is just a young cat. Its mother is close behind it, and it's pretty thirsty, taking a drink from a local stream. And let's see, I might have I don't have a vocalization, but the vocalizations these cats make are similar to your house cat. So chirps, whistles, purrs, growls. I have a few of those. Hopefully they'll play. And they are lacking this special hyoid apparatus in their throat that enables that guttural roar that lions have. And so as a result, pumas do not roar. I hope you guys can hear that. So that's a female in heat. And she is signaling to the male she is in estrus and ready to mate. So she's trying to find a male, and that's her signal. So when they connect, they'll spend 3 to 5 days or 3 to 4 days together, and usually spend that time together the whole time. So habitat needs for lions are pretty simple. Connected habitat with adequate cover, prey, and a water source. And so, you know, these are really the 3 requirements. I mean, they need cover, they're very secretive, they need to be able to hide and ambush their prey. So this is really critical for them. And this is something we learned recently through some of our analyses on habitat preferences and how they select. Range size for males averages 80 to 400 square miles. And that is not just in California. So it's more in the mountain states where you see some of the larger home range sizes for males. And in the Bay Area, it's more like 80 to 150 square miles. And for females, it's probably 40 to 100 square miles in the Bay Area. And so what that means is they need this contiguous habitat to be able to move, mate, you know, reproduce, raise their young, take down prey. And if you look at the lower left diagram, this is a sort of a diagram of a hypothetical home range distribution. And this is how it might look. And the larger shapes are male ranges. And you'll see where the females overlap into the male ranges. So typically a male will have 2 or 3 females overlapping into his range. And this is pretty typical. The other thing of note is that pumas are programmed genetically to disperse from the natal den. So you'll see where in this little diagram, a juvenile will disperse at around 2 years, and you know they need that time with the mother, and they'll disperse, or the mom will kick them out, and then they'll be on their way. And it's becoming more difficult in some of the areas where there's fragmentation in the Bay Area for these lions to find a range, and therein lies some of the issues we're seeing now. So mountain lions they breed asynchronously, and that means they breed year-round. There is a sort of a bump in the spring, but they will breed year-round, and breeding intervals are 1.5 to 3 years. And so a female mountain lion that's raising young, you know, unless the male kills the young, which is happens once in a while to put the female back in heat, she'll be raising and caring for those young until they leave, and she won't be breeding again until they leave. Her estrus is 3 to 5 days. Their gestation is 3 months, so 90 to 92 days. Litters are typically 1 to 4. And the atrisal young are just blind at birth. Their eyes open at about 2 weeks. And they have these brilliant blue eyes that fade, 3 months or so. They become what they carry into adulthood. There's a very high mortality of young, so about 50%. They're taken from den sites when the mother's out hunting, or numbers of ways, but they're pretty vulnerable at that time. And in this area, they can be taken by coyotes or bobcats or even domestic animals. So typical litter is more like, it can be 1 to 6, but it's more like 2 to 4 usually, and 2 to 3 is most common. So they're about 30 to 40 pounds at 6 months. And they'll also sort of start to travel and hunt with the mother at about 6 months. They're still showing some of these spots that they are born with, but they're starting to fade. And even at a year, we'll see some of evidence on the inner forearm of the juvenile spots. And eventually those fade entirely. They are dependent on the mother for up to 2 years, and they disperse anywhere from around 15, 16 months to 2 years. This is just a mating couple that spent 3 or 4 days on our cameras. Just an incredible sight and rare to get, but they were just all over this hill and just together. So this is what they do, and there's some interesting sounds that they make when they're communicating with each other. Oops.
Right out here is another little man.
Sorry about that. I think I can't really bring it to the front now, but sorry, I'm moving forward on that one. It's a good piece of footage. It's a little guy. So this is a mother calling out to her youngin', and you hear some of the sounds here. Her cub is aging. It's about a year old. She's at a kill. She's wondering where the cub went, and then it's spliced, so the cub shows up, and you'll see them reunite. But the sound that the cub makes is a chirping sound. You'll hear that in a sec. This is a family group, and it's actually the same mother, and it's cold, so she's gonna lie on her warm cubs. And this cub it's a nice little piece of footage just because this cub just learns quickly to follow in suit. Some nice family group interactions here. Why are pumas so important? Well, let's talk about that. This diagram here kind of lays it out pretty nicely. They're not only keystone species, they're indicator species. And it's rare to be both. They share that status with the grizzly bear and the gray wolf and a couple of different otters. But they're ecosystem engineers, and they perform a number of services to the ecosystem that are critical to maintaining healthy and balanced systems. So they control prey populations. And so as a result of that, they keep disease under control in the system, which directly benefits humans. They maintain biodiversity simply by preventing prey populations, populations of mesocarnivores and invasive species from increasing and reaching overcapacity. They provide stability in complex systems simply by being on that landscape and removing weakened and diseased prey and keeping all of the other sort of species on watch. So they're often used as a proxy to diagnose the health of an ecosystem. And it's really critical that we hold on to them. If they're removed from a system, there can be cascading effects. So studies in Yellowstone and Utah have shown these outcomes, and you may have heard of some of these studies regarding wolves that were also performed using pumas. So if you remove a puma from a natural system, the prey numbers dramatically increase and disease increases. So tick-borne diseases, including Lyme, increases in the system. Invasive species increase and a system may eventually collapse. So the problem with human encroachment for mountain lions specifically is, I mean, there are a number of problems, but habitat fragmentation and loss. So edge effects are usually linked to habitat fragmentation or degradation or destruction. And when habitat fragmentation occurs, the perimeter of a habitat increases. So what that does is create new borders and increases the edge effects. And if you look at the right diagram, after those habitats have been split in two, it breaks habitat connectivity or continuity, and it reduces reproduction success and genetic exchange and genetic diversity in species. So the smaller areas is where we are in a lot of the Bay Area landscapes. And the reason that pumas are really struggling to find that contiguous habitat they need to avoid humans altogether, which is really what they prefer. So large areas have more species than the small space. And so what it does is it can eventually lead to inbreeding in some of these areas. And so we are seeing some genetic breakdown on the California Central Coast for mountain lions specifically, and genetic drift. And so mountain lions, because of their wide range needs, are struggling with the loss of this and the fragmentation and the degradation. So the edge effects and fragmentation also favor the appearance of these new species that are able to adapt to disruption, and they're usually invasive species. And so another result of this is that most of the mountain lions that have been tested are basically tested to show they have feline pathogens. So there's diseases that are jumping over from pets to mountain lions, and this is showing up in mountain lions, a number of diseases, including feline COVID. And it's different from what we're dealing with now, but a number of the diseases you see with your own pets are now showing up in mountain lions. I've talked about rodenticides, so the poisons are also a bigger problem because pumas are closer to human residential areas and communities, and so they are exposed if they take rodents or raccoons or rabbits. They're exposed and can get mange and die from it. So conflict results, and the conflict increases basically because humans don't know what's going on, and when they start to see more cats, or they think they see more cats, and they think that there's 5 cats that have shown up in their neighborhood when, say, 5 or 6 people saw a cat, which is likely one cat, it can lead to a lot of fear and uncertainty and unsettledness. So, I think part of talking about this is to reduce that concern and put it in perspective. So the edge habitats are concerning, but they are a reality in the Bay Area. So there are things we can do to mitigate. This is a map that was provided by one of the residents in that area who's collected sightings over the last year. And he's been working with us and providing data. I think Andy has 20 or 22 cameras up. And this is just a nice visual of the sightings in and around Pacifica over the last year. So why so many sightings? And one thing I like to point out is that even though we have an abundance of data validating a lot of these puma sightings, some of the others, 90 to 95% of all mountain lion sightings in the state of California are in fact something other than mountain lions, which is why it's so important to validate or receive validation of a sighting when you hear of one. So missed sightings are often deer, coyotes, bobcats, domestic cats, and dogs. And so this is more frequent than you think, and it's even people who think they know exactly what they're seeing, it's just not always easy to know depending on lighting and perspective from where you are hiking or standing or sitting. So they have loss of movement options. If you look at this map, there's some, I mean, there's obviously great habitat for mountain lions in parts of this area. And I mentioned SFPUC, and SFPUC is, Crystal Springs there is a really nice patch of habitat, but they can't go north easily. And we do have cats that have gone north, but they don't, you know, they can't get very far, and they run into human activities and development. So they have a loss of movement options altogether. And so when people ask if pumas are losing their fear of humans, I would say absolutely not. They, you know, the young cats that a lot of people have seen in this area are often juveniles or subadults, and they are still in a learning phase. So, you know, you may see a little bit more interest from these animals or curiosity, but this is not common with adult pumas. And this is something that, this is one of the reasons why they stay with the mother for as long as they do, so that they learn really, you know, how to navigate these terrains. And you all may remember the SF cub and family group recently, the two cubs that were seen often in Sweeney Ridge and throughout areas of Daly City and parts of Pacifica. It's just another example of sort of this fragmented habitat, which has really become difficult for them to move easily in. Responsibility of living at the edge is really sort of where we are when we decide to move to the edge of this habitat. We may have to make slight adjustments to how we live to accommodate both us and pumas. And this is to emphasize how sensitive pumas are to changes in the landscape. And this cat is watching our camera, and she can't get it out of her head that there's something there, and I gotta sort of check it out. So she's gonna do that. But this is pretty common. Pumas are very sensitive creatures, and they are, any change in the environment, they're gonna check out. So what are some of the solutions that we are working on in our research and data collection? And we are building models. We are interested in habitat protection and acquisition in areas where it makes sense for pumas and can assist them to continue to persist. This map on the right is San Mateo County, where some of our previous, there's like some current and previous, but not all of our current cameras are on this map, but it gives you a sense. There's a heat sensing map or a heat map in the middle that really shows the magnitude of not only sightings data, which is reported to us, but also presence data. So there's a collision of good quality habitat and pumas trying to find habitat where they can have their range. So another solution for that we've been working on is the education and community engagement, which is a really critical piece to this. The research is something where we can provide findings and answers, but it doesn't do us much good if we're not able to educate and engage the community in a way where they feel comfortable and understand, what's going on and what the data means. So we disseminate that data and share it with communities and work with them in partnership to do that. So the other solution is non-lethal hazing, and only if really needed. So if a puma is showing up a little too much and it's making you particularly uncomfortable, there are ways you can haze the puma away with noise, sometimes light, and that can be a solution. And then awareness, and this is a family group with grown cubs. So they're about to leave the natal den, and this is just a spliced video to show you a little bit of how sensitive these cats are to cameras on the landscape. And this is just a spot they keep coming back to. So you'll see this group of three, the mom and two cubs, a few times. So one of the siblings here is pretty calm and mellow, and the other is, as you'll see, doesn't like the camera at all. So we'll come up and engage with our camera a bit. So he's not happy with it. We see this with bears sometimes too. So let me talk to you a little bit about the Bay Area Puma Project. It's a long-term research and conservation initiative on pumas in the San Francisco Bay Area. And our current priorities are to measure and model the effects of habitat fragmentation on wildlife. So we also look at bobcats, even though I don't talk about them as much. And pumas are more of a species of concern, and they are more polarizing. So we are currently working on a puma fragmentation analysis, which will determine the fragmentation, the patch thresholds at which a puma can no longer use a patch of habitat. And we're collecting data from 150 cameras around the Bay Area to work that model analysis. Urbanage adaptations are interesting to us. So how are pumas able to adapt to landscapes where there are human subsidies, or subsidies indirectly via humans from neighborhoods and areas where we have a lot more. We draw in coyotes and bobcats and raccoons just from living there and having our waste there. We're also conducting some research on the pre and post-COVID effects, which I mentioned earlier. So that's being collected through the fall. So initially, when we started the Bay Area Puma Project, we were placing GPS collars to track pumas. And, that was something that provided some interesting data to us. So what the data show, if you look at this map extending from the Santa Cruz Mountains when we were working with UCSC, they're overlapping territories, and the male territories are pretty distinguishable as these sort of larger, longer territories, and with very little overlap, if any, with other males. And then the females will overlap pretty considerably at times, and you'll see some of that here. And then there's some barriers via roadways that you can see on this map too. And then there are a few beach visits, which are pretty interesting when lions go out to the beach. This is one cat movement over 6 months, and this is in Southern California. But it's a good illustration of a territory of an animal in a human-dominated area where it's sort of sealed in by a freeway at the top, which is 91. And then we have the Corona neighborhood to the right, where it skirts the edge over 6 months. And the reason that it's at the edge of that habitat is because there's an abundance of deer feeding at the edge of that residential area. And so this puma can't really go beyond that. And so it's locked in to this particular space it's in. And if the range is too small for that cat, it can provide issues, which is happening quite frequently in Southern California right now. So our current methods, we moved away from using collaring tracking for a number of reasons. And so we're currently collecting data via non-invasive methods. And so we are using the cameras I've mentioned, and we're also collecting hair and fecal DNA, and starting to look at soil, because there's some environmental soil benefits and some really interesting technologies there. And so these are just some of our DNA collection stations where we were testing these out and, tried to determine what worked best to collect hair and then scat and some other studies. So connected habitats is another sort of big issue for many people, and I get a lot of questions about preserving these sufficiently large tracts of land and enabling these, suitable linkages. And so you'll see some nice solutions here. The bottom left is in Utah, and the right top is Montana, and then Washington State is the bottom right. And so, yeah, these are great when you have quality habitat on both sides. And so I think in the Bay Area, we have very few areas. We do have Highway 17, which is a spot where there is opportunity and need because you have quality habitat on both sides of 17. But one of the areas where there's, I think, wildlife roadkill once every 3 days in San Mateo along 280. It's one of the highest in the Bay Area. I think vehicular collisions in California cost upwards of $200 million a year. And so the problem there is you cannot provide an overpass at 280 because you're sending cats into Hillsborough or across 280 into human development. And so the answer and solution in those situations are to create barriers to prevent not only mountain lions, but also deer and other wildlife from attempting to cross. But wildlife, connected habitats are critical for genetic diversity. And if you look at these maps, the one on the right where we have been collecting data throughout the Bay Area, so the North Bay is an isolated, I'm going to show you actually another map. So this is our fragmentation analysis currently and where we are. And these are the patches of high, moderate, low, and very low isolation. And so what we see in the area on the peninsula is more of a low isolation patch, simply because of its size, and it feeds directly into Santa Cruz Mountains. But when you get further north, even into North Bay and the headlands in Marin County, it is quite isolated. And so this is concerning because we have very, very few mountain lions, maybe 1 or 2, 3 max in that entire county, until you get into Sonoma and Napa, and then you've got more contiguous habitat. So this is just giving you a sense of what we're looking at when we actually break out a habitat that's usable for pumas in the Bay Area. And so, yeah, you can see our cameras here on the map and what we're currently looking at with that data. So some of our published work from last year into this year, we have looked at puma body condition, and the body conditions that we looked at throughout the Bay Area, again with hundreds of cameras and the data from that over 5 years. East Bay was a spot that showed the best body condition, and the North Bay, some of the wilder areas showed the least healthy body condition of these animals. And body condition, so what we determined with that study was that pumas are able to adapt in environments where there's moderate development, simply because there are subsidies. And so this was an interesting find for our analysis. And then predictors of puma occupancy was another piece that we published last year that predicted what our hypothesis was originally, was that pumas would be attracted to habitat based on prey availability. But it was basically, our finding was that pumas select habitat for cover, and it was more important for them to be under cover so they can ambush their prey and safely take down the prey. And then we have another study based on the roadkill distribution on 280 that was last year as well. So our current focus, I mentioned fragmentation analysis, patch hole threshold size, and the effects of COVID, shelter in place. And then we're also looking at a stable isotope analysis, which is hair collection stations we're testing currently for analysis of a small mammal diet in pumas and the exact weaning age and health. And this bobcat below is going into one of our hair stations that's set up for pumas, that has a sticky bar across the top that we're hoping to collect hair, and we have a scent inside that little cubby that draws them in. And then the pumas at top are in a similar area you saw previously, where they are rubbing, and we have used Calvin Klein Obsession for Men that contains civet pheromones. So they are pretty happy about that. We have about 6 million images of terrestrial mammals of the Bay Area currently, so we're building a cloud database to broadly share this data and also use it in our models. But we're also working with the team to develop machine learning and AI species ID and cleaning mechanisms so that we can process data much faster. And anyone who understands the collection of this data knows that a great many of these data are blanks. And this is just the nature of being in an outdoor environment with wind and leaves and terrain and growing foliage. So we have a bunch cataloged. We have over 100 volunteers, as I mentioned. We've got people constantly logging data for us. And so this is pretty exciting for us, the team we've got working on that. This is some of the recent footages from Urban Edge. Wild Backyard is a community program we're starting that is a partnership with neighborhoods and communities. So cell and Wi-Fi enabled cameras. We want that data And we have a sightings map that you can report sightings to on our BAP.org site. We're collecting the ring and nest footage merely for research. So we don't need to share it. If your preference is we don't. We never share locations, but the data is very critical for the questions we're trying to answer. And then we have planned a wild app, which will provide algorithms to give wildlife feeds to neighborhoods sort of automatically. So that's something that is fun that we're working on for communities. And so education and engagement, we've had a cat-aware K-12 program for 10 years that provides modules to kids, takes them in the field and teaches them about predator-prey balance. And we use an equation to show kids in a laboratory experiment the fluctuations of predator and prey, which are constantly in play, and those numbers are never the same. There's one of our volunteers. We're big believers in community engagement. This is Kevin, and he's checking one of our cameras there. We have volunteers maintain up to 5 cameras in a study grid, and they're checked every 4 to 6 weeks. And then the data is uploaded to our database, which again, I said will be shared broadly with the community. So we've had a nice bump in volunteers since COVID hit. I'm almost at the end, but this is some of the insights we gleaned from La Honda, where we did a pilot study of 12 months duration in 2018 and 2019. And pumas were most active in San Andreas and Crystal Springs Reservoir in this study, and infrequent use of human trails and private properties, and pumas avoid humans. So when this community came to us and asked for this study, there was a lot of fear and misconceptions about how many pumas and other species were actually moving in that area. And if you look at the graph on the bottom, by far and away, obviously, the humans dominate on these trails, and the activity on the part of humans dwarfs what you see with pumas. We did have quite a bit of activity on the part of bobcats, which was quite interesting. And you see sort of a match in coyotes and pumas at the bottom there. But this study was a lot of fun for us, and the community came away feeling really pleased with what they learned about pumas and other wildlife. And this is just a nice footage. I have so much footage that I could share, but this is just one I selected to share with you. This is a cat. Shows you a lot of just the power of this animal, but that's a roadkill deer. And we had placed it in the tree to see what a puma might do with it. And it took a few tries, but this cat uses those strong jaws and forearms and claws to essentially feed while it's hanging for quite some time. So this was just pretty interesting for us to capture that. You see the jaws just holding him there now. Finishing up, living in mountain lion habitat. Some of the most important things to think about when you live at the edge of wildland habitat is what's around your house, trimming vegetation surrounding the house, bringing pets and pet food in at night, trying your best to not feed or attract deer, even though it's really, really tough these days. Fencing livestock, keeping them fully contained, and installing motion lights. And I know many people have the ring and nest cameras now as well, but some of these actions can actually help keep pumas from using your yard as a hideout, or, you know, depends on how much you mind that. Recreating in habitat where mountain lions are there. You know, they're most active between dusk and dawn. So if you're going to go recreate alone, I would avoid doing that between dusk and dawn. And if you want to go out in those hours, I'd go with 1 or 2 other people. I'd be aware of your surroundings and wildlife at all times. You could carry a whistle or a walking stick or a pocket knife. But what I tell people is if pumas want to kill you, they're going to kill you and you're not going to know it. And fortunately, we're not on their menu. They're not generally interested in attacking us or eating us or even seeing us. So if you do see a cat, well, we'll get there in a minute, but keep children in front of you, always close by. The last 2 attacks that were non-fatal in the Bay Area were both young children and who were separated a little bit from their parents on a trail. And again, it was a young cat in those cases. So never approach a puma of any size. Again, don't approach a wildlife carcass. You will probably force the puma to leave the area. And never approach a kitten. You know, there was an attack up north in the state when a runner got between a mom and her cub. And that was many years ago. But so avoid hiking, biking, or running alone. That's really up to your tolerance level. I mean, I leave that up to you, but you know, pumas are very aware you're there and they see you long before you would even know they're there. What do you do if you meet a puma? Maintain eye contact. I think one thing that's really important is most of the sightings that are actual sightings is a puma just sort of leaving a tail or a rear end. And so if you do see a puma that's not leaving or disappearing into the brush, pay close attention to the body language and always give it a wide berth to leave the area. So never turn your back, don't run away. Eye contact is important. And if the puma is especially interested, you know, you want to start to appear big and more powerful. So pick up any children that are next to you, speak loudly, firmly. You can, you know, if there's aggression that starts to happen from the puma, you can start to throw rocks, a water bottle, whatever you have. Always fight back. It works. And that's what happened with the young kid recently. But always try to appear bigger than that puma. So putting it all in perspective, these are the attacks that have occurred. 2 recorded non-fatal attacks in the Bay Area since 1909, and both of those were children. So the last in 1909 was a mom and her daughter who were killed by, actually they ended up dying via rabies that they contracted from the cat attack. So it wasn't from the attack itself. But in 100 years, there are only 53 non-fatal attacks in the US, which is really super low in perspective. So an average of 1 every 10 years. So when you look at the risk of death from a mountain lion, it's lower than your risk of a lightning strike. And deer, you can look at the stats here, but it's very, very, very low, the risk to us, which always amazes me because we've sort of completely removed and fragmented their habitat so much that, you know, you would think there would be far more encounters than there actually are. And it just underscores how avoidant pumas are of humans. And then I just, this is one of my favorite quotes from Schuler from the incident at Eagle Ranch, which kind of sums up the puma. And I am happy to take questions. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope I answered a lot of questions, and if I didn't, I'm happy to answer more. I didn't cover everything, but I'm happy to answer any particular questions you may have.
Okay, I'm back, Zara. I've unmuted myself here, so you can hear me, hopefully.
I can, yes.
So we jump back to the original question that I asked, which is the videos that are sent into you. Do you share them?
Do we share them with the public?
Yes.
We do not if we're asked not to share them. We usually would only share them in, say, a presentation, or occasionally if it's not sensitive, we might share it on social media as a learning tool, and we'll just use the data otherwise. Either way, it's valuable for us, but it depends on the person submitting the data and their request to us. So we're happy to honor the request, whatever that is.
Right. And how far, well, this was answered in your talk, but how far can they jump?
22 feet high and 30 to 40 feet horizontally. So
so basically no fence, nothing will keep them out.
no, in fact, when we were starting research in East Bay some years ago, there was an enclosed property with, I think it was goats or sheep, but there were 50 or so. They had netting on the top, and they everything was to spec, as you would advise someone to protect their hobby animals. And a mountain lion jumped over, landed in the net at the top, and just sort of fell in. And then he proceeded to surplus kill all of them, not eat them, because this is like a wired instinct in them. And that was really interesting to us, because we didn't think that the puma would actually be able to get in. But so yes, you need a top and you need sides on any enclosure with pumas.
So would it be, let's see. And so the female and the males have different ranges, and the male definitely has a huge range, much bigger than the female. And is there any reason for describe the difference?
Yeah. So a female puma spends 3/4 of her lifetime pregnant or raising young. And so with that, when she is, not only when she's pregnant, but when she's raising young, her territory is smaller. So her range contracts when she has young, and she will stay pretty close, and her movements will be smaller because she's leaving whatever den she's set up, which can vary. She will leave that den to go find food, make kills, and leave her kittens. And so she can't go too far. So she's got this small contracted range during that time. But that said, 40 square miles is very difficult to find in the Bay Area anymore. So if you think about the peninsula, the peninsula doesn't really house a full mountain lion range comfortably. And so that is, that's a perspective as well. It's, even a female's range is hard to find here anymore.
So are there any plans anywhere with regards to corridors on 280 or Sharp Park Road so that they can cross to Milagro Ridge or to any, I mean, with all of the freeways, all of the highways that are so busy and creating so much puma kill, roadkill,
Yeah.
are there any plans at all in the works for these corridors to be created for them, overpasses, underpasses, whatever it takes?
Yeah, so there is a corridor, or there is an overpass currently being worked on for 17. And for 280, it's a little trickier because there's a hot spot for puma kills from, if you know, Truesdale Ave south to Edgewood is an area of high puma mortality. And the problem there is there's no, what we need to do, and we've got a study we did last year that recommends barriers to crossing because you don't want to encourage mountain lions trying to cross 280 there. There's nowhere for them to go. And we already have mountain lions that have go over into Hillsborough and move in Hillsborough on the other side of 280. And there have not been any issues yet, but you know, that's a little bit concerning just because there's not enough habitat over there for them. So it's a tricky question with 280. But we're still collecting data on the area that includes Sharp Peak and that whole region. And sometimes we can actually clear out culverts underneath roadways that enable passageway without having this tremendous $50 million expenditure to create an overpass, which is a lengthy undertaking as well.
Yes, lengthy and very costly, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
And someone, are there any monitoring locations or cameras in San Pedro Valley Park? Do you know?
We have 2, I think we currently have 2, maybe 3 in that park. And we have several, and we have, I think, 45 or 50 cameras on the peninsula. And I know we have a couple in San Pedro Park. We have 1 in Pacifica Land Trust, maybe 2. And then we've got a bunch of residents there that are sharing data with us as well. And so we have a lot of data being collected at SFPUC, Sweeney Ridge, and so a lot of those public open spaces as well.
Samuel is asking, is it possible to even consider a wildlife crossing in Pacifica? I suppose for Highway 1. Is there much roadkill on Highway 1?
I don't think so, and that's really, I think this is really where you have to rely on the roadkill data, and it's not so much an issue on 1 as I think it is for some Pacifica residents that they're just seeing them more. And the questions are like, why is this happening? And I know a lot of Pacifica residents who are pretty okay with it, but I also know there's some who are unsettled by that. And I think what I was trying to show with that map is that it actually is all they can do, because if you zoom out from a map, there's these patches of habitat, and in order to get to the next or the next one, they have to cross through human areas. And it's not their preference, but you know, they're trying to survive. So that's what they do.
Mm. So you mentioned that pumas basically eat just about any meat and any animal that they can possibly get their little pawsies on. So anything from mice, you say, all the way up to deer, coyotes, everything in between.
Yeah, in this area, and they will take elk. As I mentioned, they can take down 2 to 3 times their weight. So in areas where there are moose, they will take down moose. But yeah, so their preference is to take down a deer because it provides more food, but the smaller critters are actually sort of snack worthy for them. And in some situations, pumas become specialists at certain prey items. And we don't really know why, but this happens on occasion. But most typically, pumas will primarily eat deer. And, you know, the smaller animals are often what the young pumas train on and learn to kill.
The deer, no?
Fawns all the way up, yeah.
So with regard, you were mentioning Marin County and the fact that they really have very few pumas. 3, possibly?
Possibly.
Possibly.
We know of one. So there was a year or two where we lost any pumas on, there were no pumas on our radar at all. There was an old male that had been taken on a depredation permit. But what we see with Marin is that as you head north into Sonoma, where there's a lot of landscaping, vineyards, and cultivated lands, it's trickier for pumas to cross into Marin from those areas. And that is an area of concern. So it's Highway 101. And then once you get into the areas where there are vineyard lands, it becomes harder, and a lot of the cover has been removed for pumas. And so we're in the process of doing some investigative research there on what may invite pumas back into Marin, because there's really good habitat in Marin. They're just not really using it.
Mm. But and then transferring the stats from there to our own area here in Pacifica and the our watershed.
Yeah.
Do we have do you have a number on on pumas here? How many actually reside or at least pass through our area?
So when you extrapolate based on the habitat availability, the carrying capacity of San Mateo is about 12 pumas. And that number, as you may know, is always changing because of, you know, births and deaths, and pumas don't live that long. And now they're being killed for numbers of reasons beyond that. But if you think about the fact that they don't reproduce that often and their litters are quite small, you're not, you know, there's not a lot of opportunity for them to increase. And they self-regulate through being territorial. And so that number is never really the same, but the carrying capacity in San Mateo County is about 12 pumas. If you look at Santa Cruz Mountains up to, say, San Francisco County, you're probably talking 50 cats total.
Total. So what we're seeing on these video cameras and everywhere that people are seeing them, we're basically seeing the same cats over and over again.
Yes, and the same family groups. So there was a family group, you know, I mentioned this in the last year, where there were 2 cubs, and one of those cubs ended up in San Francisco, and he didn't make it. And the other cub has been seen around, we think, but you know, you're seeing the same small group of cats on different properties.
Mm. And with all the new technology and the fact that people do have video cameras and the fact that we're actually at home now with COVID, people are actually having more sightings than probably out around their houses, probably later or earlier in the day, or practically, or just looking out their windows and seeing pumas.
Yes.
Even though the pumas are trying to just walk through, maybe, and just
quite possibly, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's some areas we've been researching where we used to see regular puma activity, and we're not seeing any at all right now. So we're still trying to figure that out too.
And would a dog be able to, let's say, if you're walking your dog, would they be able to sense that there's a cat in the near vicinity or quite close?
Yeah, usually yes. And, you know, dogs have great olfactory systems. And so they, you know, the wildlife are pretty interesting that way. In general, we use dogs to track pumas when we're trying to capture them to place GPS devices. So pumas tend to not often fear dogs and will run from them. I mean, more like hound-sized dogs or bigger. But yeah, they can typically sense that pumas are there, as can horses. And horses are quite fearful of pumas as well.
Mm-hmm. So the dogs are scared of the pumas and the pumas are scared of the dogs.
Exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. Unless you're a hound that's been trained to chase a puma, yes.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So it works both ways. So people then, we are now in the situation where we have so many people at home walking or even hiking or running or bicycling, just doing some activity. And and they're seeing somehow the encounters. I have never seen a puma, and yet I've been hearing on Nextdoor and elsewhere that people are seeing pumas. And so you're basically saying, from what I gather during the talk, is that noise and light, I mean, if is what would be something to use against them. But I mean, that's if you're bicycling, you can't really do much. You're just bicycling through.
Yeah.
You can't really get off a bike, and I hardly think the puma is going to chase a bicyclist, but then you never know.
Yeah, you know, I think in general it's important to remember that they probably see us far more frequently than we would ever be aware, and they just don't care. I mean, they're just not that interested. And I think they're not going to, you know, the risk is so incredibly low that number one, you're going to see a puma, and number two, you're going to have any encounter with that puma. But I would also remind you and the others that with a 95% inaccurate sighting stat for the state, make sure when you hear about sightings that they're validated, because when there's actually a real puma sighting, then false sightings shoot up. So everyone thinks they're seeing a puma when in fact they're maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a percentage of that that's real, and then there's a percentage of that that's not. So I think putting that perspective, you could probably cut in half or even lower the number of sightings that are actually real.
So are there enough deer to support the dozen or so pumas we have in San Mateo County?
There are far too many deer for pumas to really make a dent. And it's interesting because numbers of studies have shown that pumas can only take 15 or so % of a deer population in a given year. They can't eat that much. You know, if they eat a deer a week, that's a lot. And so I think there's this misconception that pumas are killing all the deer. They simply can't. There is a deer disease going around right now as well. So that's killing deer. So otherwise, and usually there's plenty of deer, and the pumas could barely make a dent in those populations.
There is a comment that says that you said something supposedly about not sharing pictures of pumas on social media. Is that, and if so, why?
No, we like to share if somebody submits a really good piece of footage to us, we'd like to share it if the person who submits it to us says, yes, please share it, no problem. If someone tells us, I'd rather you not share it publicly, then we honor that. So we're fine either way. We do share a lot on social media.
Mm. And is there any indication that fecundity changes in relation to the amount of favorable habitat?
It's less about habitat now, but I mean, there's so many complex factors that play into that outcome that I'd say it's one piece of the puzzle. And if we can hold on to more contiguous habitat, prevent development, large developments, more homes, more, if we can hold on to existing habitat, we can probably make it work. But if we lose much more, we are risking losing the puma here because they are in peril. I mean, they're in decline in this area.
So in reality, they can't go west. There's
Right.
the ocean. They
Right.
can't go north because of the Golden Gate Strait and the bridge.
Exactly.
They're not going to cross water.
Exactly. Well, so no, not here. But we have had pumas that swam to little islands and hung out for a day or two and swam back in South America, which was interesting.
But
not here. Yeah.
Not here.
Yeah.
So the only way is that around the bay, they go around the far side of our bay, and they end up in the East Bay, Oakland, and so on and so forth. But they do it via land rather than doing anything via the water.
Yes.
So they're locked in. They have to go. They're either south or up to us, and we are basically their last refuge.
Yes, you're absolutely right. They're locked in, and so if they go south, they probably end up in another male's territory, which in Santa Cruz Mountains, you've got animals in these territories. And so they could cross in Coyote Valley, but I do not believe any data has shown to date that pumas leave Santa Cruz Mountains and go across. I think they've only emigrated. Yeah, they've only come into Santa Cruz Mountains from East Bay, but we have not seen them cross Coyote Valley. And so the other way south is the Pajaro past Santa Cruz Mountains, which eventually gets you to the Los Padres if they make it. But it's tough. I mean, there's Hamilton Range in the East Bay, Southeast Bay, which is a really good core habitat for pumas.
And like any organization, you're probably in need of money.
Yeah.
It would help. So is there a way that people can donate and help?
Absolutely, yes. COVID has really put, I think, most of groups similar to us in a difficult situation, and we are definitely running lean right now. And if you would like to contribute to the project, you can go to our website. We have ways to donate. We also work with numbers of volunteers doing all kinds of things. So if you like getting involved, reach out. And we would appreciate either of the two or both.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So someone's asking about whether or not you know anyone who studies pumas in Baja California.
I don't. I know that San Diego Zoo has, I think they have some work on going down there, but I'm not completely sure. But it's a cool spot.
Okay. So talking about dens, are the pumas dens usually underground or under brush? And are there different types of dens?
Yeah. I'm sorry about those videos. I actually love showing those videos that got covered up by my one video, but it was showing in some cases, they are in actual dens, but it's not a given. So pumas will put their cubs or kittens wherever they feel they can keep them safe. And in this area, it could be under really dense brush and in hollowed out logs, and sometimes in the open, but in wilderness. So they try to be discerning, but it's not always easy. And there aren't as many caves available as people might think. We see a lot of that in the mountain states and in South Dakota, where I was working for some time. Lots of denning in caves there. But in the Bay Area, throughout California, we tend to see more of them. There's a lot of dense brush that is available to them, and they try to protect their young from access by coyotes or bobcats or even foxes who will come in and try to kill the young.
Mm-hmm. So the young juveniles, basically, even though they're not, the female does not have many or frequently. I mean, 2 or 3 every 2-3 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Where do these young go? I mean, we don't seem to have much habitat. So
right. So that is the main issue here. And if you recall the recent juvenile that found his way to San Francisco and spent a few days there, this is one of the problems, is that this young cat was a few months from dispersal age, maybe 3-4 months. However, you know, he didn't make it. And so it's just an issue that is a bigger deal in the Bay Area now. But you know, they do pretty well. I mean, so the elder cats eventually get pushed out, killed for that territory. And so that's how the cycle of life works with this species.
yes, because you're saying their lifespan isn't that long, so they fight it out to the death. The males do.
Exactly.
And the genetic, and then if they're as landlocked as you say they are, due to our geographical conditions here, then the genetic interchange is nominal.
It is nominal, yeah. And we're seeing that with some of the genetic work that's been done, is that we've got some degradation of the gene flow here already. So that's concerning.
And okay, so basically it looks more like a bottleneck, or
yeah, it's a bottleneck, but you know, the real problem here is just when you think about habitat, it's absolutely critical for these animals. If you see their needs for that large home range, it's critical that they have access to be able to move as they need, because males spend their entire lives just moving in their range, and they may stop and mate with a female for a few days, but they just keep moving, and they kill a prey item, they feed on it, they keep moving. And so
the males don't participate at all in the care. It's very much on and upward and onward.
exactly. And even at times they'll you know, they're driving infanticide, which is, you know, when they kill the young so that the mom will go back into estrus.
Mm.
You know, they'll do that more often than people think.
So let me just check through. Well, somebody was saying that, well, so I seem to have, There is, I don't know. There's someone asking to speak, and
Probably could do that if you wanted to.
You have a question?
well, someone wants to be unmuted, and I don't. So
Participate.
let me see.
Attendees.
Let me check. If they're even still there. Let's see. No, I don't see. I don't see. I don't see that.
Okay, not there anymore.
No, the person who was asking to be unmuted, and I don't know why they didn't stipulate. And is there a difference between BAP and Felidae Conservation Fund, or is it just that it's two names for the same organization, or two different branches of the same organization?
No, Bay Area Puma Project is a project of Felidae. So it's one of our projects.
Ah, so the main overarching is the Felidae Conservation Fund,
Correct.
and the other projects fall under that. The
Correct.
smaller, okay, all
Yes.
right. Question about poisoning. Have you seen any mercury-related puma deaths?
Not yet.
No.
Not seen that yet. Mostly rodenticides. Yeah. You know, a lot of the mange that results from exposure to rodenticides, but I have not seen mercury poisoning. I do know that happens. In Southern California, that's happened a few times.
Mm-hmm. So are you, do you actually identify individual cats? I mean, when you see them on camera and so on, on your own cameras, and you spot them, are you able to identify the various cats, or do you even want to do that? Does it help you in your research to be able to say, well, this is so and so, and this is so and so, and you know, if they don't have a collar?
Right. So it's not really necessary, but we can get that information from DNA. And for the cameras, there are times we can identify them, but as you can imagine, pumas don't have any distinguishing markings for individuals, so they don't have spots or stripes. If they're young, they do have markings. Some pumas have either gotten injuries from taking down prey, which happens pretty often. They can get injured quite a bit from taking down prey. They may have marks or scars or ear notch bites or other identifying characteristics. And so we can identify individuals through those. Mm-hmm. But we don't really need to, based on this research grid array we set up. We actually can usually figure out that number from that and our data collection over time. And in some cases we've been asked to identify, and we can sometimes, other times we can't. So there are some ways you can tell. We're working on software to do that as well. And that's a bit tricky, but it's coming along. So I would say in the next couple of years, we'll be able to use software to do that.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I hope that I've managed to pose all the questions that have come through and via chat and Q&A. And I would like to thank you, as well as all of those who have been present and attending, for your very, very informative talk and very helpful talk, considering all the anxiety that people have been having with the recent sightings. So,
Well, I would encourage everyone and the friends of San Pedro, you know, anytime you have concerns or issues or questions, please reach out to BAP, info@bap.org, because we can often allay concerns and answer questions and help guide you. So we're here to do that.
all right. So we'll keep that very much in mind. So very much thank you all. Thank you from everyone. It's been wonderful. And as I say, it's been wonderful to meet you finally through in person and to actually have this wonderful discussion about such a wonderful, wonderful, beautiful animal. And I hope you have much success.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you, Zara.
Take care.
Take care. All right. Can you see me, Zara?
No, I can't.
No, you can't? Okay.
Start video.
I can see you now.
Yeah, it's the camera's on.